This is JILLIANA Ranicar-Breese, and I have the pleasure of meeting Laura-Doe, who is English originally and moved. When did you move to Australia?
In 1988, Juliana.
On your own or with a family?
No, on my own. I was looking for somewhere where the weather was a little better.
And where were you from originally?
I was brought up in Oxford.
Oh, right, yes, of course. Okay. Right, well, we met in Brighton under reasonably unusual circumstances through Sexperts John and Rose Skelton Pearson. Laura-Doe has a very interesting vulva show, but we'll come to that later. Right, tell me, Laura, your earlier life. You tell me about it.
Well, I was brought up in the jolly old UK and a daughter of academics, so in a way quite liberal, but the conversations about sexuality were not.
But that was the era, the same. I mean, my mother was a chemist and she taught me absolutely nothing.
Absolutely.
We're talking the 50s here.
Yes.
I was totally ignorant.
Yes. But what puzzled me was because so much was discussed and I was so encouraged to be curious about everything and anything, it really puzzled me that sexuality did not come onto my radar.
And did you ask?
It wasn't, I got a sense that this was not a topic to address with my parents.
It was taboo.
That there was a taboo related to it.
Were you an only child?
I was an only child.
Yeah, me too.
Yes. But what really I found curious was that nobody was discussing it. And clearly this was something that was highly important to life, to relationships and to the evolution of the species.
What year are we talking about roughly? What decade?
I was born in 1959.
Right.
So I was.
Is that pre-pill?
No, the pill was available when I became
Okay.
interested in that sort of thing.
Because that's like a benchmark, really, isn't it?
Yes. But I was a teenager in the early 70s.
Right.
And still there was no information. The only information I found about sex was in the Little Red School Book, which my father had recommended actually, so he was willing to sort of put the information into my
You better explain
court.
what the Little Red School Book is.
You're not familiar with that one?
I've heard of it.
It's a publication whose design was really to teach about socialism and well, to be honest, I don't remember the political bent of it, but it was quite radical.
British, was it?
It was, I believe, actually, interestingly, originally published in Australia, but it was trying to teach some radical thought to the general populace and also possibly school children. And it had a small section about sex. And I purchased a copy, can't remember where from, and I took it to school, and you could see on this white cover, it was little and it was red, and there was a dark line on the section which was about sex. And because all my friends, and I myself as well, I didn't read any of the rest of it, we just read the bit about sex.
And what did it say?
Well, it introduced the clitoris, which was novel to me and new information.
Well, you knew you had one.
I did know I had one, but I had no idea what it was called.
Right.
And I realised I was excited to discover more about my erotic equipment, if you like, and I was excited to find out what this was. But when I actually read about it and saw the diagrams, I was like, I've been playing with that since I was 4. Damn, I thought there was going to be some more extra information.
Right, so you thought I could write a bit more about that?
Well, I still was curious because it just seems like there was, again, no discussion of this and very little information.
But that was British culture.
nevertheless, I was brought up to being an inquiring child. So
Right,
the
right,
fact that
right.
we weren't talking about it didn't make sense to me.
Right.
So whenever someone came into my world who was purveying information about sexuality, I was there. And there weren't that many of those people, but whenever there were...
When you say those people, are you talking about people in the sex industry or just libertines or...
No, people who gave talks or workshops that are related to sexuality.
In the 70s?
No, I was already into my 20s by the time I found such people.
Right, right. In England?
In England, I went to see... They were tended to be more spiritual teachers. Barry Long talked about sexuality. Sexuality was discussed in the Bhagwan Osho communities. They were big on sexuality. They ran workshops around what was sort of called Neo-Tantra. I went to Holland to the Humaniversity, where they were also speaking and teaching and practicing sexuality education in certain ways. So I kept following my interest in this for many years.
Did you go to India?
I did go to India. I visited the Osho ashram and spent quite a bit of time there. I did these tantra workshops that they offered. And I also...
So would that include penetration, or was that sort of like spiritual and verbal more?
No, I don't think at that time there were any workshops that actually promoted sexual intercourse within the workshop.
Right.
To be honest, I don't really remember, but the sorts of practices we did were often energetic. So a sort of in Tantra, there's often a concept of an energetic penetration or a moving of energies between two people. But there was also quite a lot of work I remember doing where we really looked into our attitudes to our gender, where there were women that were spent just time with women, and then one particular workshop I remember very vividly, where we actually we dressed up and became men for several days.
Good heavens.
And that was a fascinating insight for me, because I realised I had a lot of body image issues at the time, and as a man, as we worked towards really kind of embodying our inner masculine or whatever it was, but just acting and being a man, I realised I found every woman attractive. I had no thoughts about size. So there was a particular woman who was pretty big, way bigger than I was, and I just thought, oh, gorgeous woman in my male personality. So that was very insightful for me to kind of...
But it didn't have an effect on you that you became bisexual or anything? Did it alter your...
No, I think I've always been bisexual. I didn't, I've always thought it curious that that one would limit oneself in terms of attraction.
Right.
So yes, I find myself. I'm attracted to many things. I actually call myself pansexual.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is, I can be turned on by a beautiful tree, or a flower, or a view, or anything of beauty. Often that attracts my heart will also stimulate all of my senses.
Well, we're going to continue this in part 2. Very interesting. We'll talk more about pansexuality. Not come across that word before. Thank you very much, Laura-Doe.
Thanks, JILLIANA.